Buen Camino pilgrims, and welcome back to the Sacred Steps podcast. On this show, we're walking virtually alongside authors and pilgrims, connecting a community of pilgrims from across the globe. I'm your host, pilgrim and backpacker, author of Sacred Steps, a pilgrimage journal, Kevin Donahue. On today's episode, we're speaking with Australian pilgrim and author Claude Tranchant. Her best-selling work, Boots to Bliss, details her trip for 1,000 miles across the Camino Frances, all the way to Finisterre and Murcia. Her follow-up book was released this year, Boots to Freedom, detailing her walks across Central Australia, through Nepal, and back once more to the Camino de Santiago. At age 72, Claude's inspiring story of empowerment resonates with pilgrims from across the globe. Stay tuned after the interview for details on our upcoming episode, and be sure to click subscribe on your app so that our episodes download automatically to your device. And now, let's welcome Claude Tranchant to the Sacred Steps podcast. Claude Tranchant, welcome to the Sacred Steps podcast.
Wow, thank you so much, Kevin, for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and your audience.
I have to tell our listeners, Claude and I had a little trouble connecting between the United States and Australia. You're a day ahead, and I think we're traveling through time, and that was a bit of the problem, but we got it worked out.
Yes, and that's a surprise.
I'm so inspired because this is a lady, for those of you who know Claude's story, who is all about overcoming. And today we're visiting with Claude. We're talking about a book that everyone knows, a bestseller in the Camino community and in Australia, called Boots to Bliss. There we go. And then she has written a second book that's just recently come out. Boots to Freedom is her new book. So Claude Tranchant, first I want to ask you a couple questions about your pilgrimage story, because I think for so many people, Boots to Bliss is such an inspiring story, and many people who maybe are just meeting you for the first time or hearing your story for the first time might be interested to know how you came about the Camino de Santiago.
At the age of 58, after nearly 34 years and minus 2 days, my marriage broke down. I had to look for work. So I came to Brisbane. I didn't know anything about the Camino. A customer, her name was Anna, and we became friends, asked me if I wanted to walk with her along the Camino in France. I had no idea what was a Camino. And so I asked her, when are you planning to do that? And she said to me, in a few years' time. Oh, okay, then. I was off the hook. She would forget about it. But she had put in the seed. And I went to see my father in France before his passing in 2007. And I mentioned that to my sister, who had a good laugh, because she knew that it was not 240K, but I didn't know anything about it. So the next morning on the kitchen table, it was laying a freebie, a magazine. And for some odd reason, because I was not interested in it, I had to open it. And when I opened it, in the center of the page, guess, Kevin, what they were talking about.
I'm going to guess it was the Camino.
Yeah, exactly right. And then when I came back, and her friend, mom and dad came here, and they were leaving the next day. They had done the Camino. And I couldn't believe about all these coincidences. And I said to myself, Claude, there must be something for you to do. So I waited to be 64 because it's a retirement age here to do it.
So at 64 years young, you
Yeah.
leave Australia to go back
Yes.
to France, and you start your Camino de Santiago on what is actually known in France as the Way of St. James.
So 4 routes were created. The one from Paris for all the country coming from the north, then Vezelay for the Germany and so on, the northern part of Germany. Then they have the Vezelay for people coming from Switzerland, and the Camino from Arles, which is in the south of France, for people coming from Italy and so on. And so you follow the line, and all the country like that. So that's why we have 4 routes. Le Puy-en-Velay is walked a lot. Paris start to be walked a bit better. Arles, not so much. And the Vezelay, at the time, not very much neither. But for some odd reason, I decided to start from Vezelay. When I arrived in Vezelay, I said, oh my God, Claude, because it's on the top of a hill. So because I was not a walker, I learned my first lesson. And you walk on cobblestone, which would make a little, for me at the time, things a little bit harder. Yeah. And I started on my 64th birthday.
What a momentous occasion. Yes, that.
Yeah.
So that was 2010. You started on your 64th birthday. You're walking the Camino de Santiago alone. Yeah. You met a lot of people who were very concerned for your safety.
Yes. My children, my sister, everybody was scared except me. And I have a very bad sense of direction. But I did not understand the meaning of walking by yourself. And the Vezelay way at the time was not signed a lot. So I got lost. I did not know where to go. And I shake. You cannot imagine how I shake. The leaf when they fall from the trees and they swirl, I was like that. Till I said to myself, Claude, you're alone here, huh? Nobody's there to help you. You better shake yourself and move on. So what I did, don't laugh. I used to say, mini, mani, mo, which way I should go.
Not a popular GPS technology. You don't ask Siri which way you go, eeny, meeny. But it worked for you.
Yeah, it worked. And at the end, I got used to learn to get lost. When you get lost, you may have to learn something.
Our guest today is Claude Tranchant, author of Boots to Bliss and her new book, Boots to Freedom. Claude, I have to say, your story is very empowering, and not just for first-time pilgrims, for everyone. This is a book that really talks about learning to overcome your circumstances, learning to manage your emotions, as you were saying, with fear. You had a line in this book that really resonated with me. You said, breathe in, breathe out, relax, Claude. You can do this. You were your own motivational coach, and you coached yourself across the entirety of France and Spain to Santiago de Compostela.
It took me 8 weeks to cross France and arrive in Saint-Jean-de-Pied-de-Port. 8 weeks. Then I climbed the Pyrenees and reached Roncesvalles and then to Santiago. At the beginning of the pilgrimage, if somebody has said to me, Claude, would you like to do it again? I would have said to them, go and see a psychiatrist. As more I was walking, more I wanted to finish it. But what happened to Santiago really really was mind-blowing. I was arriving close to the cathedral, like you have done, Kevin. You've done it. When I arrived in front of the cathedral, men were there, Camino that I have met along the way, and I can't tell you where it was, were there clapping me and thanking me that I've changed them, that through my word, their Camino became different. And they live it to the fullest. Can you imagine, Kevin, what you would feel if someone said that to you? And there were many from all around the square. They were there. And I was baffled. I was feeling so much love around me. How could I return to the world we were living in? I couldn't. So we spent some time together, and then I left. And obviously, I went to the Mass. And there, I saw some of them, and I felt we were in a community of one.
Now, you weren't finished because your Camino pilgrimage went on to Finisterre, to Murcia. You kept walking, Claude.
Yeah, I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. And I did not want to return here in our world. I had such a beautiful time. You know, I went through a lot of pain, trust me, but physical as well as emotional, because I had to let my burden along the way. And so I couldn't see myself returning in the world. And I understand when somebody said they walk on the Camino and they don't want to return to the world. And I can understand them very well. So I went to Finisterre, and then from Finisterre, I went to Murcia. My emotion was different in Murcia. It was I know I had to do something. I know that I had lived something beautiful, and I thank God for giving me this opportunity and the strength of doing it. I had to do something, and I thought about it along the way, but was I really prepared to do it? But I knew that that was my last chance. So in front of the church, the La Barca, the ocean was beating these rocks, and I knew I had to bow, and I knew that I would have to walk no more. But I knew as well that I had to learn to forgive, not only myself, but others. Because otherwise I would have walked 100 days for nothing. I wouldn't have grown if I did not forgive. So I climbed Mount Corpino, and that was my last mountain. And I had a little stone shaped as a heart that I collected in France. I said, I forgive. I'm starting a blank page. I forgive all what people have done to me. A new Claude is born. Forget the old one. And I did take my little heart-shaped stone and dug under a little bush and put it there and cover it with dirt. I wanted that little heart to be protected. It represented my heart. And I was hoping that my heart will never, never be hurt again.
What a wonderful retelling of that pilgrimage. We're talking with Claude Tranchant. Her books, Boots to Bliss and Books to Freedom are available on Amazon.com in your country. I'll link them in the show notes below, as well as Claude's beautiful website, where she has many of her stories recounted there, and she's been gracious with her time today to retell them for us. Claude, you were known on the Camino as Claude the Australian. You returned.
Yes.
You began writing your book, Boots to Bliss,
Yeah.
and not long after, and I want to get the timeline right, but not long after, you began to be invited on some very epic journeys where you've begun walking around the world. I wonder if you would share with us a few of the highlights
Yes,
from your
certainly.
new book, Boots
Yes,
to Freedom.
certainly. You know, thank you so much, Kevin, for giving me this opportunity. Once I written, I was amazed that my little word, Claude's little word, will touch so many people. So time fly, passed, and I needed to find the little Claude because I was taken by this wheel of life. So I went to somewhere where nobody could find me in a way. I went in the center of Australia, in Uluru, by myself to find the little Claude again. And something happened there. So I was 68 at the time, and I saw a sign, 11 and 12, what's that? And I asked someone, and that someone said to me, Claude, it's a La Rapinta trail. So I went and do the La Rapinta. I said, at 70, La Rapinta will see me. No preparation whatsoever except walking. I knew I had to walk by then. And I did that, La Rapinta. It's in a red center. It's amazing. It's a really incredible place. Then, after I've been back for a few months, my daughter asked me, Mom, do you want to trek in Nepal? I said, no intention whatsoever. And she said to me, oh, well, I've got a friend at work. She wants to do it as well. And it costs so much. When I heard the cost, I said, okay, here I am, here I go. So that was the second time when I did Nepal, and I reached 3,210 meters.
You point out, and I think rightly so, because it's a physical challenge, that you were, 70 years old when you hiked through the center of Australia and 71 years old when you were in Nepal. But your story is so inspirational to so many. You then went on and went back to the Camino. You were invited and participated in a documentary a few years ago when you were 72 years old. You did another 22. Camino there.
Yes, I did another Camino. So I did it for the documentary called Camino Skies. It was my way to help others as well, to help this young man and Noel Smith and Fergus Grady. It was to help them. And I went there. And so we walked from the base of the Pyrenees, Saint-Jean-de-Pied-de-Port. And we walked there and finished in Santiago. Then they had to return to Australia or New Zealand because we were 4 New Zealander and 2 Australian, that include me. And I decided to walk by myself. And I went back to Ruxia, where I stopped the first time, and returned to Santiago. And because I did not want to do 3 times the same walk, I did it from Dumbria. I finished in Santiago, and then I still had some days, so I decided to walk a little bit of the Portugal one. But not a lot.
Claude, I want to ask you, there are a lot of people who are sitting at home right now. They may be thinking about the Camino de Santiago, but a little apprehensive and maybe a bit scared to go on such a big journey. Yeah. What's your advice to someone who may have the Camino on their heart?
If you have a desire, if your heart tells you to do it, do it. Don't put fear. Fear is normal. I had fear, but overcome your fear. Just do it. You know, Kevin, I do palliative care at the end of life. The lesson I've learned is when you want to do something, do it. Don't wait. Do it. Fear, you will overcome your fear. And you know, if you have had a difficult life, use your journey for that. Open your heart. Free yourself of your burden. I remember I was in Ornillo del Camino, and we had a meal in the community. And afterwards, we went to a mass. They say what you feel about your Camino. And I saw this man crying. I saw their pain. I saw their freedom. They were letting go. And I said, if you have whatever difficulties you had in your life, to allow yourself freely to do this on the Camino, it's a blessing that is given to us. And it was so beautiful for me that I was able to discover that I should not be so fearful, because I was always fearful of things. I was subservient. And you wouldn't think that now.
No, I wouldn't, Claude. You learned so much. You grew so much on your Caminos. We're talking with Claude Tranchant on the Sacred Steps podcast. Her book, Boots to Bliss, is on every pilgrim's must-read list. Her new book, Boots to Freedom, details some of her walks and learnings since her first Camino, including in Nepal, on the Camino, throughout Central Australia. A great story of empowerment and really taking those next steps to personal freedom. Claude, in the brief time that we have left, I want to ask you, because we haven't talked about this, and I always want to ask, what's ahead for you?
Okay.
What are your next steps?
So, you know, I pledged myself to walk again from Vezelay to Santiago and Finisterre and Muxia. Unfortunately, because of what's going on now with coronavirus, this is on hold. And I wanted to do it in 2021 because it's a holy year. So maybe 2022, we shall see. Hopefully, I'll be 76, Kevin.
Our guest today on the Sacred Steps podcast has been Claude Tranchant. Her books, we'll link in the show notes. Boots to Bliss, Boots to Freedom, her website, claudetranchant.com. Claude, I want to thank you so much. It has been a delight to talk to you and to get to know your Camino spirit.
To meet you, and I wish you a lovely Christmas, and to your family and everyone. And peace for Christmas, please. Just love each other. That's what counts at the end of our life. Love each other. And walk the Camino, if you wish it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will link Claude Tranchant's books in the show notes. Thank you for joining us today on the Sacred Steps podcast. Stay tuned for details on our next episode. Buen Camino, Claude.
Thank you for having me. Buen.
On our next episode, we're talking to pilgrim guide Brett Thoman, who recently completed the Jesus Trail through Galilee. We'll hear his inspiring story of walking in the footsteps of Christ on our next episode of the Sacred Steps podcast. Please click subscribe on your podcast app so that our episodes download automatically to your device. Thank you for joining us on the Sacred Steps podcast. Until next time, be well stay safe, and buen camino.